Okay, so let's take a look at the brush tool here. So I'm going to go over to the side and I'm going to click on the brush tool, and let's see if my zoom here works on the screen. So there's the brush tool. Well, that was exciting now, wasn't it? So you'll notice up here I have a couple of choices. I won't be able to go through all the options because some of them are only relevant in certain situations. The down arrow here will give you the two that you'll probably use the most. Size of the brush, so you'll notice the brush changes here as I make this larger and then I go over the document. And the hardness is how solid the edge will look. So I'm going to put a black dot on here right now, and you'll notice it's very faint and fades away on the corners. I'll go back in here and I'm going to crank hardness up to 100%, and you should see this one with very firm, solid edges. And then it's just a matter of playing with maybe in between the 50%. You kind of find your medium that you want to work in. Now it's important to understand the hardness issue when it comes to brushes, because although we may not use the brush tool all the time as just a coloring tool, we do use it when we use layer masks and things like that. Opacity is another control. I'm going to put this at 100 while I do this. It's how thick the ink goes on, if you want to think of it that way. Notice it also appears a different shade, so I decreased my opacity to 49%, 10%, go back up to 100 for 95%, and you notice you get varying degrees of color because the thickness of the ink you're putting down on the page. The thinner the amount, the lighter it looks. Flow is a tricky one to really grasp unless you're moving the tool. So if I have 100% flow, I'm just going to shortcut this down to make a smaller line here. When I go across, you can see how often the little circle is repeated. I'm going to decrease the flow to about 33%. You notice it's a little lighter. I'll decrease it to 3%, even lighter still. If I leave it right on top of each other, it slowly adds on top. It's cumulative, so I'm just clicking away on the mouse here. This is the airbrush tool, I believe. It used to be enable airbrush, so that should act like a normal airbrush should, where it just continues the flow. So instead of having to click every time you want to add paint, you can just hold that down and it will add paint as you move along, and you can see it's drawing there. I'm going to up my flow though so it shows a little more. So I'm just clicking once and I'm drawing. Okay, if I turn off the airbrush, click once, it sort of does the same. Gives you this sort of idea we're looking at. So just a couple things there. They have very similar properties, but different instances. You'll see how they sort of pan out with what you're working on. Over here on the brush presets, these are all brushes that are included with Photoshop, and there's properties that are included with them. So if I include this one, you'll see it's got a different shape. Okay, I'm going to change colors to make that show up a little better. Let's do some sort of red. Okay, and you can see it acts more like an actual paintbrush. There's also the brush tool down here, and this one gives you a lot of control. So if you're a bit more of an advanced user, you might want to look into here, because you can choose what the end of the brush looks like. You can also, if you move out of the presets down to these ones, you can control the reflection about the x-axis, reflection about the y-axis. You can rotate it. You can change the angle of it, and it's most noticeable if I grab something like this maple leaf, put one down, and then if I change the angle, I'll rotate it 50, 60, 80, what am I doing here, 110 degrees. You'll notice it's now in a different direction. So that's some more of the advanced tools on the brush side, and you can click on these ones: shape, dynamics, scattering. It really comes down to just playing and learning what you could do with different brushes. So lots of options under the brush command. The big three you'll use though are opacity, size, and hardness. And from there, as you kind of become a more experienced user, you'll start to explore what you can do in here. But for the most part, those three are the ones you're going to use for the brush tool. And also, it should be noted that the brush tool extends, a lot of the commands extend to the eraser tool. So if I click on the eraser, you'll notice I have size, hardness, and opacity as well as the airbrush tool. There's erase to history, which we'll talk about at a later date. So now I can just erase some of these things. and you'll notice it just deletes them and goes right down to the background or bottom layer. I'm just going to close this up. So there's your brush and your eraser tool. Just a quick overview. The brush actions over here, though, really worth exploring if you're more of an advanced user.